Take your mark, get set. It's time for the Addict to Athlete podcast. Everybody out there, Coach Blue Robinson here. Thank you so much for downloading, sharing, and subscribing to the podcast. We greatly appreciate you doing so. And thank you so much for everyone who's been helping out with our Project Elf. This is our Christmas fundraiser opportunity that we help give Christmas to those who have found themselves on some hard times, specifically our athletes who may have had some issues throughout the year, and the public at large. Maybe you've had some situations by which you've lost some income, or maybe because you're in that recovery mindset now that you find yourself, going to treatment and going to therapy and doing all these things, and you've kind of fallen behind. That's what Project Elf is about. And thank you so much for all of the donors this year. We had a tremendous experience during our Giving Tuesday, and I want to thank everyone who's helped out and continue to. We've had a few people come in just kind of like after we've closed the program that have desperately needed some help, and by the grace of what I would say is amazing team participation and community support, we have got that covered. So thank you so much. We seriously could not do this without you, the volunteers, the athletes, the community at large who help support Team Addict to Athlete in these endeavors. So thank you so much. Hey, check out our website, addicttoathlete.org. You'll find all kinds of stuff on there, from our backlog podcast to information that you might need if you're willing and ready to take the plunge into sobriety. If you're ready to start this event of life, this new way of erasing your addiction by replacing it with things of greater value, jump on addicttoathlete.org. You'll find everything that you need as a starting point for your recovery, from online resources to even how to jump in and connect with me, Coach Blue, for mental health therapy and counseling. I'm available there, but also just being able to check out some of the things that we offer, addicttoathlete.org. Well, athletes, today we're going to talk a little bit about connections. And I'm talking specifically about connections that we need to make in this day and age in order for us to maintain a solid foundation of sobriety. If you think about it, addiction recovery is seriously more about building and repairing and reestablishing relationships than it is anything else. This is why you've decided to get on that path of recovery in the first place. And you can make more friends through active participation in events and experiences that Team Addict to Athlete provides, then you might actually think. And I tell this to a lot of people who come on board with this team. If you are afraid or unwilling to invest in relationships, this is not your recovery program, because this solid foundation you establish develops teammates and friendships that go on for years to come. And so really I want to talk a little bit about how does this happen when we are now adults. We're in this world of really being cautious on who we invest with and who we invest in, because we've got to keep ourselves safe. We're now rebuilding our home team. We're establishing our foundations. The last thing we need is for a relationship to go sour, or one to invest in that really has alternative motives. And so I want to talk a little bit about any success that you've had in connections has been because you brought that true self to the forefront. Now, granted, so many of us have been duped into relationships that were negative by nature because we were sick of being alone. Being alone is one of the worst things that we can do to ourselves as human beings. So there's a book by a man named John Collins, and many of you guys might know him, but so many of you guys probably do not. See, John Collins was a pretty influential individual, and his mission that he had, that he needed to complete, really was one of, I think, firsts. And I want you to follow me here for a second, if you will. John Collins was one of three individuals, and we know the other two individuals in John's story more than we know of John. And I think that there's a real interesting paradigm and a very real principle we can learn by listening and understanding what John went through this experience that he had with two other gentlemen. Interestingly enough, Michael Collins was one of the three members of the first manned mission to the moon. You guys may have heard of some of these guys, right? Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, right? Well, Michael Collins has come to be known as the loneliest man in history, or the loneliest man in space, because, see, Collins was the pilot of the Apollo 11 mission, and in 1969, he was the one that helped put humans on the moon for the very first time. Now, he never became a household name like his crewmates Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin, because he was stuck there in the capsule, orbiting the moon while the other guys went down and had all the glory. But his mission was so absolutely important because as his colleagues, Armstrong and Aldrin, descended to the surface of the moon, Collins was piloting that command module around the moon in orbit for close to 28 hours. And he was, in every aspect of the term, alone. Now, Michael Collins said this, and I really want to impress this on your mind. Can you imagine being in his position where these three, members of this mission are dwindled down to one as the two descend to the moon? And Michael Collins had a very interesting experience, and he recalled this in his book and in an interview from NPR in 2019, and it really stuck out to me because of what it meant. And he said, this is what Michael said, not since Adam and Eve, not since Adam has any human known such solitude as I did in experiencing my 47 minutes of each lunar revolution. See, think about that for a minute. He said, I don't think loneliness really comes into the equation, except it seems to be in the mind of the pressing of time, being alone, ultimately, utterly alone. I need you guys to understand this. Never since that dawn of time, whether you believe in the Adam and Eve or if you believe that we were amoebas popping out of the sea somewhere, no human has ever been that far away from another human in the history of time. Think about that for a minute. Now, not only that, listeners, the thing that's pretty wild about what his experience was is that Michael Collins in that module was directed and governed and guided by Houston, right, from the Earth. So what happens when this capsule goes behind the dark side of the moon? Everything is based off of radio functioning, And he said what happened is as he crossed the dark side of the moon, he lost contact with everyone. No radio. Everything powered down except for basic life support because that's just kind of how things were set up and developed back then. And for that span when he was absolutely, literally, figuratively in the dark, can you imagine the feelings of being alone? Now, the reason why I want to start this podcast talking about connections with Michael Collins and his story is how incredibly amazing that is, because he talks about that being a figurative state of your mind, being alone. Many of us don't understand that it is absolutely kind of now, this day and age, impossible to be alone. We have people all over us pretty much at all times. But many of us feel that way. Many of us engage life this way. And it is not good for us to do that. As human beings, we are social creatures. We have to be able to have this kind of connection. Now, the interesting thing about connections is, where do we develop these when we are told that we have to change everything about our lives, when we have to walk away from the relationships, the friendships that were established, maybe even family, because the potential risk of keeping us stuck in our addiction is so high. It's interesting because as we look at what you're willing to give up in order to develop your sobriety, in my own case, needing to walk away from family and cut family off because they were not conducive to my recovery, that is the most scary, strange mindset that I think we ask you to do in addiction recovery, because these relationships are real. And not only are we saying, hey, you need to walk away from people that are keeping you stuck and people that don't appreciate you and people that are keeping you in that addiction's, nasty grip. We're also having you walk away from the substance that in and of itself, to a degree, is a relationship. The absence of using and the walking away from it could be considered, and it has been measured, as a death. You're walking away from something that gave you pleasure, that gave you surrender, that gave you escape into the great unknown, as Michael Collins once did, right? Well, I want to talk a little bit about when was the last time you actually met someone new? And I'm not talking about an acquaintance of someone that, set you up or whatnot, but someone new. And who is the connection that you made that with? And has it increased your life? Has it been able to, help you kind of step out of comfort zones? What goals do you have right now that would be easier if you had connections with someone new? And I know that this is sometimes one of the things on Team Addict to Athlete that brings a lot of anxiety is when people come down here for the first time and they join the team, they're all kind of in this mindset of, I got to be a collegiate athlete. And that's not the case. You do not have to be a collegiate athlete or even athletic to join this team. All you have to have is a willingness of your heart to invest in yourself. The relationships are going to come. That's a natural thing, but most of us hold back because we're afraid of that. We're nervous about that. Because think about it. I love talking about this in group. I say, you know what? When we were kids, it was super easy to meet people. Think about it. When you were a kid or you take your kids to the playground and your kids are out there playing, or when you were young, you would walk onto that playground or what have you, walk into that first day of school. You might be a little bit nervous, but as soon as you notice someone about your same height, you were like, dude, let's be friends. And that's how friends develop. I remember, think about this. I want everyone to think about when they met their most dearest, bestest friend. Think about that for a minute. I remember one of my friends, his name was Cody, when I moved a dozen times, man. I moved so many, more than a dozen. I'm talking like maybe 5 or 6 dozen times. And I remember one time I moved into a house in Provo, Utah. And I went out in the backyard. I looked over the fence and I saw this kid. And I'm like, hey, that kid's about my same height, about my same age. We started talking. Cody became one of my dearest and best friends throughout all my high school, elementary, junior high, high school years. It was the wildest thing. Now, as a young kid, that's super easy. But as an adult, if you did that, you might go to jail, right? No. Think about it. You don't go to a playground with adults and be like, you guys want to be friends? It is kind of a weird mindset to even think about. But how do we meet new people? Now, I'm hearing a lot of this with people that I'm working with specifically in this new, bizarre kind of like, dating app world where we now are doing so many relationships based off of swiping left or swiping right, or liking someone's profile. I don't know how it goes, but I'm hearing so many people talk about how difficult it is because relationships in general are changing. The way we meet people are changing. And so when I see new people come onto this team and they're very weary at first and they're a little bit apprehensive, but once they come and they're like, wow, I think I could get behind this. Once you throw on an Addict Athlete jersey, once you show up to a meeting, congratulations, you are part of this team. It's a great feeling. But how do we grow like in the area of our connections? These literally have to be experiences that we are willing to have if we are truly going to invest in ourselves to really turn over a new leaf. Now, first things first, it is super easy to join a group, to attend an event together, to go to a networking experience, through work or whatnot. But I need to really stress the fact that you've got to step out of your comfort zone first and foremost. There's so many people that are nervous about making relationships because they have this internal guidance system that's set to low self-esteem, low self-worth. Is anybody going to notice me? This is a hard one. And it's interesting, even as adults, we still yearn for that, right? So I would say first and foremost, you've got to find your tribe. We talk about this all the time. This is why I love this team so much, is because we have so many people that are runners. We have so many people that aren't runners. We have so many people that are softball players. We have so many people that aren't softball players. We find a niche that you're interested in. And more often than not, it's just coming to be with the people. And I love that more than anything. Social groups don't have to just be in recovery. They can be community groups. They can be church groups. They can be service volunteer positions. They can be things in your community so long as you're willing to invest that first little sense of anxiety to walk through that door, that threshold of whatever group, whatever tribe's on the other side of it. Now there's an interesting thing about this kind of mindset, and that's you've got to get yourself in a position where you're okay to socially start to network again. Now, this is an interesting thing, too. What I've seen a lot of times is that people will jump on social media first and foremost, and they'll start poking around in there. And I've seen so many people that have tested the water, specifically with Addict to Athlete, through our social media outlets. And then people will say, hey, this is where I'm from. This is what I'm doing. What do you think? Now, most people will put 1 or 2 posts out there, And they may not get a lot of feedback at first, so they'll pull back. And I'm saying don't do that. Whatever group, whatever tribe you begin to invest in, start investing in it. If you're nervous about meeting people in person at first, jump on the page first. Right now on Team Addict to Athlete, specifically our home base Utah County chapter, there are so many things that we're doing, from women's group to upcoming men's group to open workouts to our regular meeting, to our experiences and endeavors on the weekends. There's so many things going on that all you need to do is simply look, invest, invite yourself and come. That's the best part about getting involved. Now, if you leverage yourself in these kind of situations, you'll understand that this can be absolutely huge for you. For most people, it's very underutilized to kind of establish yourself on a social media platform first. Most people spend way too much time browsing social media, but they don't do a lot of investing in it. They don't do a lot of talking and communication and bouncing ideas off of and seeking clarifications, right? One thing you can do is jump on addicttoathlete.org. All of our stuff's on there, from meeting times to locations to everything. But you putting yourself out there and leveraging some of that social media to work for you instead of just seeing, what other people's lives are like, would totally benefit you. Because the positive result is that there are people, like-minded people, such as you, out there utilizing those pages, those groups, who want to get to know you. So if you take advantage of these opportunities, you're going to expand your friendships, your network. It's going to change some of the way your life is managed. And the best way to do this is to simply get yourself involved. Now, I know that's kind of hard because, some of you are shy. I understand that. And you have to be cautious as well, because the last thing you want to do is invest in someone or something and have it bite you on the bum again, right? Well, you got to make a conscious effort to meet more people. Now, this is kind of hard, especially when you're getting into a situation where, as an adult, you're kind of making that same play in the playbook of, can we be friends? So let's talk a little bit about what that looks like. If you're like most people, you're probably going to go, grab a cup of coffee, or maybe you're going to go, to the gym, or you might be going to school, or might be, starting a new job or something. These are all opportunities for you to meet new people, which means you have to actually be willing to talk to people. See, this is one of the reasons why I love the fact that early on the team's inception, there were so many people willing to wear an Addict to Athlete jersey. It very visually identified you as someone in recovery, moving from an addict to an athlete, and people would inquire about that. Then you become that walking billboard, that verbal testimony of how your recovery is being established and how it's going. Those opportunities for you to meet new people are about you stepping outside your comfort zone and introducing yourself to new people. And you are bound to organically create new connections that can help you move to whatever level you want to, move towards. And personally, I've seen this happen in my own life. I've become a lot more verbal with people, more so than I ever have, simply by commenting with some small talk. And when I try and reach out there and meet someone new, some amazing things kind of happen. One thing I've known is that everyone has a story, and everyone has these abilities to either share or to withdraw. And what I mean by that is it's pretty easy to see which people will invest back in you versus the ones that want that superficial conversation to be the end of the relationship. But you've got to be able to communicate and talk and to invite and to inquire and to kind of search a little bit about what that person's, needs, goals, wants, and thoughts are, simply by having a conversation. So when you meet someone new, it's sometimes easy, to kind of leave it at that, at face value. Where a lot of times what I've seen, people will kind of like circumscribe all the way back to the beginning and talk a little bit about what their interests are. And this is one of those things I see a lot of people invite, that individual to their tribe. Hey, we have this team Addict to Athlete. You should check it out. For instance, there's been so many people that I've talked about, when they said, hey, what does your bracelet mean? Oh, this is our colors, black, red, and white. And I tell them about what that is. Oh, it's wild. I have a brother who struggled with addiction. You being willing to open those doors to talk to people are huge. So think about areas in your life that you might be able to start inquiring new relationships that won't be so, out of the norm. And like I'm saying, look around the things that you're currently doing, the places that you're currently investing in. For introverts, this is going to be super hard. It's going to be really difficult. But this is where you establish maybe some of those emotional, intimate relationships first. Then you start to expand. And for you introverts, it's going to be a little bit more difficult because you're going for quality, not quantity. So all you have to do is find that tribe that I'm talking about, make one connection, and you've got it made. Now, on Team Addict to Athlete, we do a lot of interesting experiences. We have a lot of events. We do a lot of service. And I need to tell you that one of the most amazing things you can do to meet new people is to come volunteer or serve with this team. Regardless of your ambitions, regularly committing to service in some capacity is not just a good human practice, but it's also amazing for your soul. That altruistic kind of motivation inside of you when you're serving out of your inconvenience opens doors up for so many opportunities. And what I mean by that too is we've had a lot of people that haven't wanted to participate specifically in events or runs, but they are more than happy to volunteer and to serve. And I think that is the key to this team. Many of you out there listening to this have served this team in one caliber, one way, one shape, one form. And for that, I'm extremely grateful. This whole team operates off of volunteer and service, if you think about it. But from these race directors throughout the state of Utah that call upon us when they really are in a pinch and we can surrender our time and volunteer for their event, some amazing things happen. First of all, it erases kind of that platitude of, you are just an addict. Once an addict, always an addict. That's simply not true. And your service renders that, I guess, to be not true. But the neatest thing about being able to volunteer is that it opens yourself up to experiences outside of this team. So many of the athletes that have started running that then move into service opportunities go beyond and upwards with the people that they know. I've been so amazed in the last 12 years that we've been able to have Addict to Athlete be an entity for recovery in, specifically our community, that the running community itself has embraced us. So much so that I see these relationships that are built, as a foundation of Addict to Athlete, but then beyond that, from individuals who now get in contact with race directors, and those relationships kind of thrive from there, all the way down to the athletes themselves who meet the muggles, right? The non-using folk out there. Your service for those kind of things are amazing. That's one reason why we are called to do a lot of service with some of the more difficult tasks. I think about, John Bozon's, Squaw Peak 50 and the infamous, the challenging Windy Pass aid station. There's a reason why Addict to Athlete is continually asked to invest in that aid station, because it's not easy. It is one of the hardest aid stations to ever man. You have to carry all of the gear, all of the food, all your gear, all your food up that 7-mile stretch of just, climbing your way to heaven, and then typically sleep overnight for these athletes, these runners to be, at the very pretty much end of their run. And so you're there all day into the evening, making sure that these athletes that you don't know have the fuel they need to finish that last, 7 or 8 miles of that race. It is not an easy thing. Not only that, you have to constantly keep those water jugs filled, which means you also walk down to that natural water spring, fill those jugs up, and make 50, 60, 70 trips back and forth, lugging heavy, heavy water jugs. You get nervous and you start to freak out when the water gets low. And man, I'll tell you, every runner that completes the Squaw Peak 50 understands that if it weren't for the Addict to Athlete volunteers at Windy Pass Aid Station, they probably wouldn't make it. That is how important your service is. Then on the outside, I bump into people that have met you athletes out there and say, hey, Addict to Athlete, yeah, I bumped into them at this aid station and I heard this and they helped me get that. That is one way to absolutely guarantee that you're going to have these relationships in the community that doesn't care about your addiction history, but cares about your heart and your willingness to serve any of your inconvenience by carrying that much up to an aid station in the middle of nowhere. So think about that for a minute. Second of all, think about, hanging out outside of the team and doing things with your team, outside of regular scheduled programming. What I mean by that is so many of you, I've noticed through your social media posts, are meeting outside of the team. You're building healthy relationships with people you can trust, and you're inviting one another to birthday parties, to barbecues, to movies, to dinners. That to me is an experience that I didn't know would happen on this team. I thought we will completely segment, these lives and these experiences into the athletics and the recovery program. What I didn't anticipate is how many relationships you guys take to that next level. We've seen, married couples, hanging out with other married couples, and we've seen these relationships truly begin to heal and mend. And then when things get maybe difficult or challenging, you have a resource and a foundation of people that you can trust because you understand the rhythm by which their hearts beat. See, to me, I think that's one of the things that's quite amazing. Being able to gain a different perspective on everything as it pertains to building relationships is crucial. When you hang out with the same people all the time, you will most likely begin to share a lot of the same views towards, things in your lives, from your recovery basis, from your running experiences to the races you want to do to, bucket list items you want to overcome. And being able then to expand that into more diverse groups, into your community, maybe your church, maybe your employees, maybe your workplace, maybe your school. You take all of those relationships and you gather them and you use the ones that work for you and you excuse the rest. So by spending more time with all kinds of groups, having a central group and a central foundation, a central tribe, if you will, can you imagine the influence you're going to have on people for good? It's incredible to think. This will allow you to have an increased self-awareness, maybe an increased degree of empathy and acceptance, and you'll definitely be able to accept others for where they're at. It'll also kind of benefit you in the way of being more creative, because your friends, your teammates, your social network are most often going to have a bias towards something else in the community, something else in their mindset. You being able to influence, them for maybe your mindset or your thoughts, and be able to say, well, this is what I think, or this is what I share. It broadens people's horizons. It broadens people's perspectives, and that creativity you can kind of share with one another. You guys, it goes on for miles. So I'm not saying you go in there and convert people to a specific religion or to a certain way of life. What I'm saying is you hold your values strong. You share those with others. And then, like it or not, just by being you're going to influence each other. And the cool thing about that is it doesn't matter if you're a Republican or you're a Democrat. I could care less, because it doesn't matter on this team. What matters is that we are all on the same team trying to strive for a better tomorrow. So the cool thing about those is that, there are some people that have some pretty staunch views. I mean, I'm sure I do. But I don't want those to ever come between maybe an experience that I could have with someone, or maybe limit someone's desire to want to invest, in me or the team because of those. Therefore, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what religion, what political party, what ethnicity, whatever that stuff is. It doesn't matter, because what we're going for is, again, that heartbeat, to get in rhythm and to be in sync with that mindset and spirit of recovery. Making better decisions comes along with having more people around you that can help you see things from different angles. It helps you get a more complete and clearer picture that you can make better, deeper, informed decisions about. I mean, think about it. There's been so many times I've sat back and I've listened to some athletes talk, or I've been preparing a lesson or something and thought, man, I'm not really applying this in my life. I'm watching Coach Jensen and Coach Earl and Kenny and all these guys and Coach Holly kind of create their own programs within this team. And I'm like, all right, now I can start developing things that I want, because they're taking the load off of my shoulders. It's helping me make better decisions for what I need for myself, because they're picking up some of that slack. Now, the neat thing about that is, as I see things from different perspectives, I'm also still remaining teachable, which is what relationships do. They help you remain teachable. If we close ourselves off and we build these fortresses and walls around us, we become stagnant and stuck. So your friends, your teammates, they're going to know you pretty well. They're also going to know when you're not doing so well. They're going to be like, hey, haven't seen you for a while. Or I noticed that, you haven't been as active lately or whatnot. Or, hey, you know what? This is the third time you kind of turned us down. How are things going? This is that accountability piece that so many of us yearn for, that so many of us don't get. And it may sound odd, but these relationships truly grow into a capacity of love. And that love is more about that mindset of like, hey, I care about you. Your life means something to me. And this is why I think this concept works so well. You are just one connection away from a breakthrough, athletes. And that's the beauty of this. So don't limit yourself. And I hope by now you can kind of understand the value that statement truly makes. You being one connection away from a breakthrough. Those connections that we make, seriously, they last for the longest time if we nurture them, if we honor and are true to ourselves and are true to the influence that we have and the willingness we have to learn from others. That, I think, is one of the biggest things we can do. So, this is a shorter podcast because I don't want to get too high up on the platform and get too verbal out here. But what I want you to do, athletes, is to share this with someone that you want to invite to your tribe, whether it be Addict to Athlete, whether it be Addict to Artist, whether it be to the men's group, to the open gym, whether it be to the women's group, or what have you. Share this podcast with someone that you want to invite, and then kind of show them why their participation, their relationship would benefit you, and you would benefit them by stepping out of that comfort zone. It's going to be one of those things I think that will take a little bit of time. Again, because I'm more about inviting than trying to convince people that this is the path, because there are many different things people use to find sobriety. But the one thing holds true. If we are sick of being alone, we have to be willing to invest in ourselves through opening up these new experiences and maybe allowing that anxiety to turn into energy, to grab that doorknob, to walk through the door, and to be invested. And athletes, that, I think, is what makes this team work. So thank you, everyone, for listening. I'm excited for some of the podcast guests we have coming up. Please continue to check the website, addicttoathlete.org. Until next time, please turn that mess into a powerful message.